Hello and welcome to India's World. Today we are going to discuss the latest attempts to open a dialogue with the Taliban in both Afghanistan and Pakistan. The Afghan President Hamid Karzai has been talking to the Taliban secretly for several months. This is apparently an attempt to broker a last-minute peace deal before his term expires in a few months' time. The Taliban are also being engaged in a dialogue in Pakistan, where Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has begun talks with the outlawed Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan or TTP in a bid to control terrorism. How does one understand these developments which attempt to bring the Taliban into the political mainstream in both Afghanistan and Pakistan? What would be the consequences of the Taliban becoming part of the political process in these countries? And how might this affect India's interests? To discuss all these issues, I have with me a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Katju. He was India's ambassador to Afghanistan immediately after the rout of the Taliban. In fact, the house he occupied was earlier a Taliban prison for women. The ambassador's house?
Well, one is not certain. Well, that's not the house I occupied. That's the ambassador's house.
Ambassador's
the Taliban
house.
had occupied
Exactly,
that house.
Exactly. And it had, on your wooden staircase, I remember seeing it still said Allahu Akbar engraved in black.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. Mr. Rana Banerji, he was Special Director in India's External Intelligence Agency, the Research and Analysis Wing, R&AW. He knows the Afghan-Pakistan region well and is a security expert. We have Ambassador T.C. Rangachari. He has been India's ambassador to Algeria, France and Germany, and he is currently the director of the Academy of International Studies at Jamia Millia Islamia, Delhi. Welcome, gentlemen, to this conversation, this discussion. Let me begin with you, Vivek. Before we talk about the developments in Afghanistan and Pakistan and the specific dialogues, let me ask you a generic question. Is it correct to bracket the Taliban in Afghanistan and Pakistan together? Because one is targeting through its terrorism a government in Kabul, the other one targets the government in Islamabad. But despite this, are they ideologically and politically similar?
I think it's both yes and no to your answer. There are good reasons to bracket them, but there are also good reasons to keep them separate. Now, why does one bracket them? Because ideologically, as you've noted, there are very major affinities, and beyond ideological affinities, there are shared sentiments and shared loyalties. Now, the reason why I would also separate them is because their orientations are different. The Tehreek-e-Taliban in Pakistan would no doubt, or many of its constituents would no doubt, assist the Afghan Taliban in operations in Afghanistan should that be needed, but not the other way around. I do not think that the Afghan Taliban, dependent as they are on the Pakistani establishment, would join the fray on the side of the TTP against the Pakistani forces.
Okay, Mr. Banerji, let's talk about Afghanistan. What is President Hamid Karzai up to? He refused to sign the bilateral security agreement with the US. Signing that agreement would have actually allowed millions of dollars in aid, military aid and civilian aid to come in. It would have also allowed residual presence of US forces in Afghanistan. So he refused to sign it, and now a presidential spokesperson says that not signing that deal with America has created the right conditions for talks with the Taliban. So has Mr. Karzai switched sides?
No, I think it is both an attempt to go down in history as having, had something to do with the withdrawal of Americans, and also a possible delusion that he is able to reach out to the Taliban. The Afghan Taliban have already denied that they have been engaged in any secret talks, whereas it is possible that some elements through intermediaries such as the Logar governor, Asadullah Jamal, or some others, some ex-Taliban who are emigres abroad like Sayyid Tayyab Agha and others, have been in touch with the Afghan government, Karzai government. The hardcore of the Afghan Taliban have clearly distanced themselves. They would not want to have anything to do with Karzai.
Ranga, President Karzai, besides his belligerence against the US, he's become belligerent towards them, has also been releasing Taliban prisoners, claiming that they're innocent people who've been put into jail by the Americans on false pretenses, while Americans and even his own opponents in Afghanistan say that these are hardcore Taliban people who've killed civilians. So is he trying to appease the Taliban by doing this?
Well, I suppose this is part of the same strategy that Mr. Banerji was talking about just now, of trying to find accommodation with the Taliban and signaling to them that he is willing to talk to them, and using these as possible ploys in which they could be persuaded to have a dialogue. If you see, earlier on you were asking this question, what you called a generic question about the Afghan Taliban and the TTP. The TTP has laid somewhat similar conditions for the dialogue with the representatives that the Pakistani government has nominated. Release a certain number of prisoners, and of course there are other conditions which there's no way in which the Pakistan government could accept, certainly not at the beginning of the dialogue, not knowing where the dialogue is going to go. So it's possible that, you know, these are all steps that are being taken in an effort which I personally think are unlikely to succeed, because forces like Taliban are not amenable to persuasion in a dialogue process.
Yeah, maybe we'll come to that. Vivek, do you think Hamid Karzai is not signing the BSA despite the Loya Jirga, the National Assembly of Elders, Tribal Assembly, endorsing it? He had called, expecting that they would say no, but they said yes, go ahead and sign it. He still refused to sign it. So why has he done that? Is it because he expects to tilt the post-pull-out political balance in favor of a particular ethnicity, his own ethnicity, the Pashtuns?
I think Karzai is really confused.
Yeah.
This is a time of
But he's forcing the Americans to exercise the zero option of not leaving any troops behind. Why is he doing that? Unless he sees some advantage to Pashtuns in that.
Look, there are all kinds of reasons that can be ascribed, and let me give you a couple of them. At least till some weeks ago, there were many people in Kabul who felt that Karzai is not in a mood to leave, and he wants to go to the country and say that he is in discussions, serious discussions with the Taliban, that these discussions have the prospect of peace, and that he needs more time. But if we keep that aside, because he is now saying that he'll be going, and I think it's it's very unlikely that he'll stay, because the election process is much too advanced. So why is he doing this? Does he genuinely feel, because in the past he was identified with the Taliban during the jihad? There were Taliban-like groups in Kandahar with whom he says himself, there's a recent interview he's given in which he said all this, that he was with them. So, does he really think that these people are good, that there can be a political process with them within the framework of the Afghan constitution, the constitution of the republic, as opposed to the emirate? One doesn't know. These are questions.
All right. Okay, we need to take a break at this point. We'll continue with this interesting discussion after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the dialogue that is going on with the Taliban in Afghanistan and the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan in Islamabad. Mr. Banerji, let me ask you one more question about Hamid Karzai. You said he's doing it for history. Now, if he wants to prove himself to be more anti-American than the Taliban, more sincere, more of an Afghan nationalist, then, you know, he's an outgoing president. Why is his own legitimacy much more important to him than the legitimacy of the Afghan state, which one presumes will be more permanent than Hamid Karzai?
Well, partially the reason is that he still hopes for some sort of an elder statesman or advisor role in whatever new dispensation emerges. But actually the only negotiated, power sharing agreement which would work is something which always was pulled off in Qatar, which the Americans and the Pakistanis work out with the Taliban, with the section of the Taliban, and if they can seal this, this is the only power sharing agreement which would work, and in this agreement there would be no place for Karzai.
Okay. Ranga, there are a whole host of Afghan political leaders, non-Pashtun leaders, who think that Karzai is trying to tilt the balance in favor of the Pashtuns. He has often said that if he doesn't get his way, he will do a deal with the Taliban when the Western troops leave. Do you think the political situation, if it tilts in favor of the Pashtuns after the American pullout, will stabilize Afghanistan or will it destabilize it?
Well, as far as demography is concerned, although the Pashtuns do have very large numbers, they are not a majority. In that sense, therefore, to equate stability in Afghanistan, or for that matter, any country, with one section of the population which might have numerically a very large number, is something which I think needs to be looked at a little more carefully. In regard to whether or not Afghanistan will remain stable, the election process, whatever kind of leadership it throws up, that is one thing. But beyond that, it is a question of how far the Afghan state is able to sustain itself in case the kind of thing which happened in the 1990s is repeated by the Taliban, an effort, to try and capture power, capture the government through violence, through military means and so on. How far and how long the government is able to sustain itself.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to Pakistan, Vivek. In Pakistan, why has Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif broken the what seemed like a consensus between the military and the civilian government to launch an offensive against the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan? After all, these people have killed hundreds of civilians and military personnel even in the last few weeks.
I think that has been the preferred option of Nawaz Sharif all through. He said it even before the elections, during the elections, that his first option is to reason it out with them, to have a dialogue with the TTP. The question is whether such a dialogue has a chance of success. Just as talking with the Taliban bestows, to my mind, bestows a degree of legitimacy in Afghanistan, similarly, this is bestowing a degree of legitimacy to the TTP. I personally doubt whether this will succeed. And there are already noises coming out from some of the TTP negotiators that their real purpose is to have Sharia as the constitution of Pakistan, replacing the present constitution.
We'll come to that in a minute. Mr. Banerji, why do you think that Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan did not send its own members to negotiate, but nominated intermediaries, which are, they were known to be sympathizers, but they're non-Taliban mullahs? Is it because they can then exercise a veto power over whatever these negotiators say and still distance themselves from the negotiations?
No, partly it's because of their own safety. They are not entirely certain that the hardcore of their leadership would be entirely safe if they came out into territory where they are easily detectable, and they aren't also certain that they wouldn't become a target of American drones. So basically they have adopted this ruse, and then they have made demands like wanting to meet the army chief and the ISI chief in conditions of absolute security, which for any government to concede straight away would put them in a position of great weakness.
Okay. Ranga, let me take the point that Vivek was making. Pakistan's government's decision to talk to the Taliban has led to even the non-Taliban mullahs demanding that Sharia be adopted, Islamic law be adopted in that country. So this dialogue with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, besides removing the civilian cover for military offensives, has actually pushed the politics of Pakistan rightwards towards an Islamic discourse, towards Islamic law.
Well, I think let's for a moment just briefly look at history. If you go back to 25th January 1948, in the Eid message that the Quaid-e-Azam Mr. Jinnah sent to the Bar Association in Karachi, he said that Sharia will be the basis of the law in Pakistan. So now, for people to say that Sharia is something which is unacceptable, etc., I think this stage is long past gone. There were various measures that have been taken in the past, particularly during the Zia years and subsequently, which have not been repudiated, which have been incorporated into the law, some parts of it also into the constitution, which makes now going back and saying, no, we are going to be a secular republic, or we are not going to follow Sharia, etc., very difficult. As far as as Nawaz Sharif's strategy is concerned, I think this is probably buying time. He wants to go through the process of a dialogue, etc., so that the public is convinced that there is no alternative to having to have a military operation against the TTP. And
do you agree? Because I don't agree with you on this. But let's hear an expert.
The question is, what version of the Sharia? As far as I can see, Ranga, the idea that Mullah Aziz, for example, has is that the application of the Sharia should be of the kind that the Taliban applied during their regime in Afghanistan. And I think the Pakistan state, while it sanctions Sharia in certain areas, certainly, and the Pakistani people certainly don't want Sharia to be applied as it was applied during Taliban Afghanistan. That is the issue to my mind.
So there is a debate, Ranga, about what kind of Sharia, and the Pakistani constitution is not sort of a Sharia constitution.
It's not a question of the constitution being a Sharia constitution. What I am saying to you is that to ask this question as to whether Sharia can be a basis of law, that stage is long past gone. We are talking in terms of what are the present laws. Clearly, there is a section of society which is a very modern section. There is a section which wants, which is a very fundamentalist section. And therefore, there is a tussle. In the specific case between, in the context of the present discussions between the Taliban, wherever it leads to, the TTP and the Pakistan government, to my mind, the Nawaz Sharif government is trying to buy time.
Okay.
The basic decision of wanting to have military operations against the TTP is something which probably the military is already in favor of and wanting civilian support. And this is a question of building public opinion so that everybody is convinced, and you don't have people
that's a big conspiracy theory, but we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing the dialogue that's going on with the Taliban in Afghanistan and Pakistan and the consequences of these dialogues. Vivek, do you think that the leaders of Afghanistan and Pakistan have surrendered political initiative to these militants and risked the integrity of their state, in the sense that all the stakeholders are not on board for these dialogues? In Pakistan, the people who are negotiating with the Taliban are personal and party loyalists of Nawaz Sharif. In Afghanistan, we don't even know who's negotiating, and whether there again parliament and the opposition have not been taken into account.
So there are significant differences in the negotiating process. In Pakistan, after all, you know who the negotiators are. It's taking place in the glare of publicity. There's been a media statement, indeed a joint statement which is issued. In Afghanistan, it's all being done in secret. And the Taliban, as Rana rightly said, have said that there is no such dialogue actually going on.
Yeah.
So there is this difference. Now, the question whether they have surrendered, I think they have both in their own way given unwarranted legitimacy to these groups. Now, they are groups that are a reality, but are they legitimate? Because reality and legitimacy, to my mind, are two separate things, and both these countries will pay a terrible price for this legitimization.
Ranga, do you agree with him? Because up to now, what he seems to be saying, that up to now the Taliban were constricted to small spaces. Okay, they didn't control the whole of Pakistan. They were only in North Waziristan or thereabouts. In Afghanistan also, they didn't control the whole of Afghanistan. But by entering into this dialogue, you actually, they may end up determining the agenda of the entire country, their respective countries. So you see the prospect of both Afghanistan and Pakistan going into power sharing arrangements with these people who are completely undemocratic and who don't care for public opinion?
I think it is highly unlikely that the Taliban in Pakistan would ever come to control all of Pakistan.
No, they don't. Now, I'm saying, would they come, you legitimize them, you make their ideology spread all over the...
Just one point. I think one of the points which the government negotiators made was that this would be limited to areas where the Taliban are strong. TTP is strong. What has Aziz said? He says we are talking about the application of Sharia all through the country.
Exactly. Today you see the negotiators on those who were nominated initially by the Taliban, the TTP.
Yeah.
Imran Khan was one of them, and he said no. His party said no. There was a person who was named who was a member of the JUI. Maulana Fazlur Rahman said no, he cannot be party to it, and so on. There is the old sort of the mullah of the Lal Masjid in Islamabad, who is actually a government employee. Now, this how representative are these people in
No,
terms
my
of
point was
talking?
that, these are people who didn't have a national platform. Now you've given them a large public platform.
Well, they are a reality which have to be dealt with. And as I said, I think this is an approach, this is a way in which the Nawaz Sharif government is trying to buy a little time, build up public support, so that when the military operations do take place, I don't see that there is an alternative to that, because the military seems to be very clear that it's not possible to negotiate with these people. Then the public support would be
You made that point. You made that point. It may be correct. It may not be correct. Only time will tell us. Mr. Banerji, do you think these negotiations may come to nothing, as Ranga says. They may come to nothing. But the Taliban will still gain. They will pretend to negotiate. They will buy time. And they will use this time to propagate their ideas, their ideology, their politics. Already Pakistani television, Pakistani newspapers, they're full of mullahs and maulanas talking about Sharia, what kind of Pakistan there should be, So, in a sense, their political purpose is served through negotiations, and they can continue with their suicide bombing simultaneously.
I don't quite agree with you. You see, they are negotiating at present from a position of weakness, because they apprehend a strong army riposte to take place in North Waziristan and South Waziristan. To avoid that and to continue having public sympathy, they are trying to adopt these measures. But there is a substantial body of opinion in Pakistan, including the conservative intelligentsia, who are getting tired of these Taliban tactics. So they would want, or they would come around to a view that the writ of state needs to be re-established. And that is what Nawaz Sharif is counting on in going through with this process of negotiation, using people who are conservative right of center, who are regarded as sympathizers of the Taliban. He will then say that even with these people, I couldn't get anywhere with the Taliban.
So you agree with Ranga?
Absolutely.
Okay, but you disagree.
I'm not so sure. I'm not sure whether Nawaz Sharif has the stomach to enter into what will be a terribly bloody and difficult operation for the Pakistan army. And let's not forget that the Pakistan army is not good at counter-insurgencies. They are not fully trained for that. Second, they will see that India will get an advantage, will get openings. A third, the Pakistan army too, does it truly really want to go in, or does it think that there is a glimmer of hope? And as far as the TTP are concerned, I agree that at the moment they've retreated a little bit. But that is it. They've adopted a tactic which the Pakistan state has done against us.
Okay.
Keep the pot simmering. Don't let it boil over.
Okay. Raga, if the Taliban get legitimized in whatever form, I'm not saying they will come into a power sharing agreement in Islamabad or in Kabul, but if they get legitimized in these two societies, what impact might it have on the Muslims of South Asia, the Muslims of this country, and how would it impact India's interests? In fact, I would like all of you to answer this question quickly.
Let me very quickly before that make one small point, which is, well, small in this context, but I think very relevant in the Pakistani context, that this whole business of building public opinion is very necessary. Also because Imran Khan campaigned on the basis of talking to Taliban, etc. And his party today controls Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is where these troubled areas are. So it's very necessary to build that kind of public
we're running out of time.
As far as South Asia is concerned, frankly, in India, I don't think we should scare ourselves into believing that because the Taliban is doing whatever it is in Afghanistan or in Pakistan, India is going to be so deeply affected on religious or political grounds that we need to worry. Yes, we need to worry for Pakistan.
Mr. Banerji.
Yes, I am also not party to the alarmist scenario that if, Afghanistan falls to the Taliban, immediately there will be, Pashtuns and Afghan Taliban coming into Kashmir and they'd spread, terror in a much escalated manner. This is an alarmist scenario. But yes, we need not be complacent, and at the same time we need to be aware of, the impact of Salafi Wahhabi movements inside our own Deobandi.
That was my more emphasis, not Kashmir.
It's a difficult thing.
Vivek, last word to you.
I think ideologically, the underpinnings of the Indian state are at complete variance for what the Taliban, both of the Afghan and the Pakistan varieties, stand for.
Okay.
They are against our fundamental interests.
Okay.
Now, will they impact on our Muslims? I think our Muslim community has the good sense not to be swayed by the kind of Salafi versions which are emerging out of this caboodle.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. We run out of time. So thanks for analyzing this complex situation. Some of you disagreed with each other, but so be it. The situation is complex. So thank you once again. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week with another interesting issue. Till then, goodbye.